Hello, we're Bonnie and Greg Dixon with Health Pioneer Theater, and we're here with our partner, Jerry Smith. And today we're going to talk about Provender again, how Provender differs and why Provender matters.
That's right, Greg. And if you've been following along, and we have stored those so you can see the two previous episodes, you can see there's a lot of rich history that Marta and Amber have recorded for us on the early days of natural products in the Pacific Northwest and Oregon, and in particular, Provender we're going to focus on. So they have a lot of interesting things to say. Marta and Amber tell how Provender grew from promoting a holistic view of food to embracing many other social values and initiatives that developed in the past decades across much of the Pacific Northwest. And then in our 33-minute segment, Amber will tell us some of the details, the practical challenges that she worked through during those developments, both as a retailer and through Provender as well. So as a pioneering organization, these stories tell how Provender became an epicenter of cooperative growth, from early days of natural retailing becoming the nexus between natural retailers, natural producers, and natural consumers. And it still is. So let's enjoy, get comfortable, get a beverage of your choice, and let's watch the final episode.
So a little more about the origins of the Provender Alliance at the Equinox gatherings. As I mentioned before, at the Equinox gathering, it was determined that TILS would form for the farmers and Provender would form for the people focused in making and selling natural and organic foods. So the manufacturers, the distributors, the salespeople, which later became brokers, and the retailers, and more. More people are included in that, but I'm not going to get into all the details. So what was interesting about the Equinox gathering was that, I mentioned before that I was astonished because a lot of the people there wanted to have far more political conversations than I was ready for. But I realized over time that that was a necessary part of what we were doing, because what we all did share was a holistic view of what we were trying to do. That being able to sell great supplements and awesome food is a wonderful thing, but we wanted more than that. We wanted the whole enchilada. We wanted sustainable treatment of our land, air, and water. We wanted compassionate and sustainable treatment of each other in the business model. We wanted compassionate and respectful treatment for all the participants in the industry. We wanted perfection, but that's okay. We may or may not have realized we couldn't always have perfection, but working toward it was something we all shared. That we wanted to be inclusive, and we wanted everyone to have a place at the table. And I appreciate that more and more as time goes on, and as I have been in and out of different parts of the industry, some of which I felt were doing a more or less good job of holding all those values, and some which just seem to care about part of it and not the rest. And I'm still someone who would like to see the whole thing. But at any rate, Provender came out of it for all the people who wanted to focus their attention, even though they espoused all those same goals. Provender, in my mind, was for the subset of that group that wanted to focus that through selling and making food. Distributors, retailers, manufacturers. And so it began as a way of educating one another and communicating one another, congratulating one another, and just basically a way of forming community so we didn't all feel so alone with trying to create this model that we had never seen.
Well, and there was not, the internet was not around then.
Right.
And I'm looking for someone who has a particular product or a spice or something, we had to write letters. I mean, you could not just, maybe you could call on the phone. I mean, but how are you going to know? So one of the things that Provender did and did well was it connected manufacturers with retailers and brokers and distributors, so that when retailers said, hey, my customers want, we want a pasta sauce that doesn't have any tomatoes in it. So we want to have a pasta sauce that's made out of squash or something like that. Well, if a manufacturer doesn't have a connection for a squash grower, for organic squash, or for whatever, there's no way for them. I mean, there's no way, but it's not easy. What we did was we made it easier for retailers to ask distributors for products or manufacturers for products, and we talked to distributors about getting products into distribution. Just Toby Tofu Pate, which, and Toby was a really important part of Provender's history, but other places in the country couldn't get tofu pate until there was a way to get it distributed, and Provender was one of those connections for Toby. Same with the creamery, the Springfield Creamery. Connections were made, and the economy of scale that was created when we all came together made the whole Northwest natural foods industry more efficient and made it better in terms of our ability to meet the needs of people who wanted natural foods. So, my stated goal and what I understood was that we were focused on getting good food to people, whatever that took, and that the business was secondary to that. Although we needed to have the business to be able to support this process, what was in our hearts was that we wanted people to have good food. And we used to say that over and over again, when are we going to work ourselves out of a job and everybody will have natural food? Who knew it was going to be like this? But this is before corporate America discovered that this was a profit center. I feel like that was one of the advantages of organizing with Provender, and it also educated. We were allowed to educate, not allowed. We gave each other information that we had, and we organized around issues. For example, some of the supplements manufacturers were getting hammered pretty heavily about regulations that were making it difficult for them to sell their products. And we had consumers that really wanted, we had customers that wanted certain supplements, and they were going to be gone. And those people were really helped with those things. And so one of the things we were able to do with Provender is organize people, or to give them information and connections to get information to give to consumers, so that consumers could lobby the government to say, hey, we do need this. We need this particular supplement. Here's how we can do it. So we created a structure and a support system for natural foods to become more available from the Northwest, and that was our goal, and I think that in some ways we met that pretty well. Do you think?
Yeah. When you talk about working ourselves out of a job, just a quick aside, but when I was still a teenager on the East Coast, I actually had a dream in my sleep one night that I walked into the local convenience store, and that it was, and this is like back in what, 1974 or something, that I walked into the local convenience store and that there was a mix of products on the shelves. They had junk food right alongside natural food everywhere you looked. And I remember thinking, wow. And I woke up and I thought, I wonder if that could ever happen. So
yeah, okay.
Now we have, every Safeway has a major section of natural or organic foods.
Pop-Tarts, they're natural.
Mixed in. So, it actually became that. Where
It wasn't really how we wanted it to be, and also a lot of the people that are making the big money on it are not the people, not the farmers and the small manufacturers. They don't make the money out of it until they're bought out by some corporate overlord. But
Yep.
But still, I think that educating each other and connecting with each other was one of the most powerful things that Provender has done, in terms of being able to make a powerful voice and there's a facilitator for people who want natural foods and people who want to give natural foods to them. And Provender has held that space very well. I mean, I haven't been active in Provender for a while, but the Northwest natural foods industry is in pretty good shape.
Yes.
We're pretty proud of our local.
Yeah, we did well through a couple of recessions and everything. The things continued to grow. So it was from Provender, which came out of the Cascadian Regional Library Equinox gatherings, that I ended up meeting people who taught me a lot of what I knew about how I did my job, about making my business work better, about how when you get to the point where you're managing people, how do you do that in a professional and humane way, and still remain on good terms. Not always possible, but you do your best. And it was, basically it was, so many people who went there have a similar story to mine, that without attending Provender conferences, without meeting the people they met there, they would not have had a career, and our industry as a whole in this area would not have prospered. And we did manage to do that in an area that had, for a few decades there, was going in and out of recession quite a bit. We did fine. And so I'm really grateful to it. And it may be, for what it's worth, I'll offer my perspective on a political aspect of this. And I mean politics with a big P, is that it does matter who you elect in some cases, because the existence of Cascadian Regional Library, it was a project that was funded from the CETA program, which was inaugurated by the Carter administration and taken away afterward. And the CETA funds funded a lot of small business enterprises to get them off the ground. It was sort of a New Deal kind of thing. And in some cases, once the funds were taken away, the business was not able to stand on its own, and it disappeared. In many cases, it found a way to survive and prospered, as was the case with Provender. So Carroll, the Cascadian Regional Library, was disbanded, but all the projects that Carroll started, wisely began, continued under their own steam.
I was hired by Community Energy Bank
Under CETA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back when we had an Office of Appropriate Technology in Eugene.
That's right.
Yeah. It was an amazing time.
Well, and as time went on, one of the things that we built into the Provender Conference was we brought in consultants like Carolee Coulter and Vern Ho, and people that were providing just exactly that, business training. How do you handle personnel issues? How do you handle things fairly? But bringing in someone who wasn't just a stock, like Robert Half person or something. It was, Carolee knew what we were doing in the natural foods industry. She was one of us, and still she had these skills that people really clamored for. And there were other business, margin and markup, and how do you do that? And we had roundtables and panel discussions where retailers would talk about different ways that they manage their perishables, or how they handle shrink, or do they use markup, do they use margin, what's the difference between those two? And those are for some people, they needed that information because they just sort of figured out what they wanted to charge for it, and they charged for it. And we taught people accounting, and I mean, not accounting, but basic bookkeeping that you can do in terms of a conference weekend. But other things about how do you relate to a broker versus how do you relate to a manufacturer's rep? What's the difference between a manufacturer's rep and a broker's rep? What's the difference between? When I remember when I started, that there was quite a bit of different set of goals and different priorities for all four of those groups: the distributors, the manufacturers, the brokers, and the retailers. And there were, I think that if I remember correctly, there were more retailers than any other group.
Yes.
And we had some brokers and some distributors, but we really had very few manufacturers. So I remember that my first year at Provender, my goal was to increase the number of manufacturers in the percentage. And we did that. But we wanted everybody at the table, and we wanted to have people ask questions of each other and say, for example, as a broker's rep, what drives you nuts when you come visit a retailer? What is it that you want the retailers to do to be ready for your visit so that you can have a productive visit and you can get what you need out of it, and that they can get what they need, the information they need? And same back with retailers. So what is it? Do you want somebody to just come drop a list of, I mean, when I was a buyer, I had a way that I dealt with reps just because of my particular schedule. I always said, come visit me, bring me samples, leave me a list. You don't have to go through everything. I'll ask you questions, and then I will call you in a couple of days. They knew that was going to happen. But if we didn't have that, I had permission to do that because I had learned that at Provender, that I could say to my rep, here's what I need from you. And the reps were happy. But if you just sat there and retailers would complain about, oh, he just talks my ear off, or I just don't, so we would have these round tables, and people said, you got all four groups all in the same place? I'd say, yeah, and they were fine. I mean, we picked people who we knew would be able to handle that sort of thing, and they handled it gracefully. And I thought that one of the things that we did very well was bring all four of those groups together. And we encouraged people to have direct communication with each other, because it wasn't always that way. And people get hired as buyers in retail stores. They don't know what to do. They're just, somebody just says, here, you fill the shelf. And so being able to teach a retail buyer, how do you approach somebody at a trade show? What do you do? How do you set boundaries with that? Or how do you get what you need from that person? And that you can go to a manufacturer like Rising Moon. Remember Kirk and Rising Moon? I loved their pasta sauce, and I knew that I could sell their pasta sauce, and I knew that I could sell their ravioli, but they weren't in Now People's Warehouse. And Now People's Warehouse was our primary distributor. So every gosh darn trade show, as a retailer, I took my Sundance badge and said, I'm a retailer here, and I want you to carry this product. Here's some ravioli. Here's some bread and taste it. And I don't think I was the only person who got them in there, but one of the things that we did at Provender was we talked about your responsibility to make things better. Because, for example, when I was a buyer at Sundance, that was a big deal at a trade show because we did a lot. We did $6 million in natural foods in under 1,200 square feet, which I think is more productive per square foot than any place outside of New York City. And so when I had the Sundance buyer badge on, people wanted to sell stuff to me because they knew I could move product. And so we at Provender encouraged people that were retailers, or that anybody that had any kind of influence, to use it for good. So find a small company that you really support and get other retailers to try their product and get them on the bandwagon, and then go to Mountain Peoples and say, hey, we will carry this product. We will sell this product if you will carry it. And that, I think, is one of the things that Provender did so well, was kind of grease the wheels to get people connected, but not in a sleazy way. It was a friendly way, it was kind, and it was, I don't know, it felt like it was comfortable. It was not creepy.
It's like, how can we make this work for everyone? And that was one of the wonderful things when you would try to explain why someone might want to be involved with Provender, and say, you know, this is a place where companies that are competitors come together and cooperate. This is the place where we all get to breathe, instead of saying, how do I beat that other fellow at this? That was a place where you and the other fellow could be, and forget about all that and say, how do we lift up our whole industry? What's going to work well?
How do we solve mutual problems?
And it was very, very good, because it created a lot of cross-pollination and idea exchange that helped us all. Yeah.
And it was we were lucky in that we had good board members. Most of our board members were just so supportive, and we had a period of time where we decided that we needed to expand, and they decided to make my position full-time, and it required some seed money, and there were companies and individuals who pledged money on a monthly basis to pay my salary to prime the pump. And I was full-time for, I don't remember how long, but we put money into the bank. We became very, stable's not really the word, but I mean, we were built on a solid foundation, and we moved forward, I think, with a lot more confidence and a lot more support. And I was really grateful that we had the board members we had, because we had some pretty stellar folks that really, they were very committed, and not, they were committed and skilled, and if they didn't have the skill, they'd find the skill. And you were one of the most steadfast board members, and even when you weren't on the board, you were a really great person to bounce things off of, because you had this perspective, and you owned a business, and you had all this information that I didn't have, that's for sure. What we did was, or I guess I'm assuming what they still do, is we created a community, and it was a community of people who shared a set of goals, and the goals were about helping each other out rather than stepping on each other or being worried that the person next to you is going to steal your idea or take your business. But it was more about we come together because we have this common set of values, that people matter, that food is important, that clean food is really important, that being well is a really important part of life, and that's all connected to our food system.
And that our participatory management, where everyone has some say in what's going on, graduated, but that there is feedback, and feedback is allowed, you know.
Yeah,
that was important.
It's not an oppressive environment to work in.
Right, that we want to create work environments that are more collaborative.
Mm-hmm. So it's health, not just from the food, but in the meta, you know, for the psychological part.
Right.
Not an abusive place to work.
Right, that it's like we're not abusing our bodies with bad food. We shouldn't be abusing each other either.
You know, my belief is that we were not. Yes, we were stepping away from something the way that it was, that we felt was not healthy. But my belief is that we were going towards something different and better, that we weren't just running away, we were creating something new. And so when you go to a Provender conference, you were part of creating something new and or something better that had more parts of it, more parts of yourself were going to be included in the agenda than just the part that goes, hey, I got something, build some muscles, you know. It was a whole sort of thing. Down to the food that we served. The food was always a challenge, and we'd have a lot of donations, and that was another way that we supported our manufacturers, and our brokers supported us by bringing food. And I think that they don't do that anymore, but
there's some of that. They have a snack room now, I think, at Hood River, so that can still happen. But I think I did attend the Hood River event one time, and it's amazing. They've worked with the staff at the Hood River Inn long enough now that the kitchen knows exactly what to do.
That's so great.
And it's pretty darn good.
Because we were out in the middle of...
We were always having to reinvent the wheel without the facility to do it in, yeah.
There was one place that we were, remember the place where we were, it was up, I think it was Port Townsend, and they had never done a conference like Provender before, and they thought that the reason we were not using meat was because we were too poor. So for breakfast one morning, they brought those big trays of bacon and set them down in the breakfast table.
Carts full of bacon.
And it was a gift. They didn't put it on our bill, and they were telling us, you know, we felt like we wanted to give you this gift. And the entire Sundance delegation got upset and walked out. Nobody knew. They thought I had ordered this as the...
Yeah. And certainly not everyone who attended was vegetarian, but we needed to make sure that we had that
meal.
We needed to make sure we had that covered, and that no one was going to be confronted with meat when they didn't want to be. So,
and it was I just about lost it. But then we also were able to do Lost Valley, where we could bring in our own chef, and we brought in Anton from
Holy Cow.
Holy Cow, yeah. And Anton is such a character, and he would walk in every year. He would walk in. He'd say, "I can't possibly work in this kitchen. There is no way I cannot feed people in this kitchen. This kitchen is too small, or the refrigerator is not big enough." Or he would have his fit, and then he would go produce this incredible food, incredible food. And then of course he would say, "I want to do this again next year." You know? and so we had the two choices. Either we had to work with people who had no idea. They thought natural foods was like iceberg lettuce and grilled cheese sandwich, or salad for 3 days.
Yeah, just salad.
Yeah.
Nothing but salad.
And so we had to kind of introduce people to tofu and tempeh and some of the other more exotic sort of things like wheat meat, and then get them to not just use it but do it well, because the people that we were serving were natural foodies. They wanted decent food, and they deserved it.
They had a finely trained palate.
Yes, they did. They certainly did. Yeah, I mean, I really liked the conferences we did at Lost Valley, but Lost Valley was a conference center, still is actually, out in Dexter, and there were so many. It was pretty free for all, so we had a lot of opportunities, but there were some basics that we had to figure out, and I mean,
and it's rustic, to say the least.
It is rustic, and
I was close to primitive, so
their bunks and things. And I mean, they were comfortable bunks, but then, they would forget things, like they forgot the year they forgot the linens. And we showed up on, I think it was Wednesday night. The conference was starting on Friday, and Wednesday I said, "So you're going to have all these," we're walking around in the dorms, and I said, "So when did the linens go?" And they said, "You're bringing your linens." And I said, No, we're not." And they said, "Oh yeah, we didn't plan for linens." And I whipped out the contract and said, "Right here, linens." And they said, "Oh, okay." And they started running around to everyone who lived in the whole community, and they all had to give their sheets up, and they did laundry and laundry and laundry.
Oh, dear.
And they finally got. I mean, we got enough sheets, but it was touch and go. So I mean, we also had the food that we wanted, because we had Anton and we had manufacturers bringing food. So the food, even though Anton complained about it, was absolutely exquisite.
It was good.
And so it was always this choice between how primitive do we go, and then we also get all these choices, or how mainstream do we go, and how much, what are the limitations
and
on the food?
have certain aspects of our conference taken completely out of our control.
Exactly.
I think that is resolved. I suspect that's a big part of the reason that they have stuck with Hood River now for umpteen million years, because the Hood River Inn has learned to do what is needed.
Yeah, that's great.
And they're willing to do it.
Because it was, I mean, in those days, it was not, people did not know what tofu was in a commercial kitchen, unless it was an Asian kitchen, and it was always kind of like talking to Martians. I mean, they were looking at us like we were nuts.
This is a good story about why eat natural. Best story I ever heard, and it's from Doug Green, who started New Hope Communications, published the Natural Food Merchandiser. One year he was the keynote speaker at the Provender conference, and he basically told us his history with natural foods. He had had a career as a high-level salesman for a chemical company that made all those additives that get put in food. And so he had this route where he would call on the executives of these major agribusiness food manufacturers, who shall remain nameless, but you know who they all are. And he got very mysteriously sick. And he was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and he had to take some time out. So he went to recuperate, I think on a beach in Mexico or something. This was part of his talk. And he befriended another vacationer while he was there, and they were chatting, and the other guy was really healthy, and Doug was not. And the other guy got to talking to him about, well, what do you eat? And Doug said, well, what does everybody eat? And he told him, and the guy goes, oh boy, that might have something to do with why you're not feeling good. And the guy basically gave him an education in natural foods, and Doug thought, well, that's weird, but I'm not getting any other answers that are working for me.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose, so I'll try it. And he put himself on an entirely natural food diet with as much organics as he could, eating whole foods. And he said at first it was kind of odd, but then he really started liking it. And his health came back. He was fine. So one day he was doing his job, and he called on the executive at a major food manufacturer to sell his chemicals. And he kind of liked the guy. The guy was intelligent, and he enjoyed talking to him. And he just sort of asked him a candid question when they finished their meeting. He said, tell me, why do you guys put all these chemicals in the food? What's it for? Why we need this? Why do that? And the executive just looked at him in astonishment and answered him very candidly and said, we're not in the business of selling food. We sell image. And that just had such an effect on Doug. He's like, I'm in the wrong line of work. So we have Natural Food Merchandiser. Anyway, I love that story. And maybe you'll actually interview Doug at some point and you'll tell it differently, but that's what I heard.
Wasn't that great? All three parts of that are available in our YouTube if you've missed any portions of it. And there are a lot of special stories that I think very few people knew, even in Provender today. So the old timers can tell us a lot about our future when we know about our past. So just a reminder that if you like this, please pass it on to subscribe. Don't forget to whitelist our email address, which is noted on our subscription. It's very simple. Just your First and last name and an email. And also, you can watch all of our productions on our YouTube channel, and that will be noted on our page. So, in any case, thanks for joining us. We look forward to talking to you next week. We plan to have a special guest. So thank you and have a great week.